It was close to 2 in the morning when he glanced at the clock on the dashboard and let out a slow, tired breath. The soft glow of the instruments reflected off the windshield, illuminating his exhausted face as the truck rolled endlessly forward. On both sides of the highway, darkness pressed in so heavily that it felt as if the world had narrowed down to this single stretch of road. The steady growl of the diesel engine was usually comforting, something that lulled him into a rhythm, but tonight his senses felt sharper than usual. Every sound seemed louder, every shadow felt closer. He told himself it was just fatigue and that the next rest stop was only a few hours away. A light rain was falling, not enough to demand the wipers, but enough to scatter tiny droplets across the glass. The headlights caught each one, stretching them into thin, shimmering lines that vanished as quickly as they appeared. The road ahead was completely empty. No cars, no taillights, not even the distant glow of another truck. Normally, that kind of isolation brought a sense of peace to long-haul drivers. Tonight, it felt wrong, as if the silence itself was watching him, waiting. He turned on the radio, hoping for company in the form of voices or music. All he got was static. He switched channels, then another. Nothing but the same lifeless hiss. With a quiet sigh, he turned it off and focused back on the road. That was when he noticed something ahead, right at the edge of his headlights. At first, it looked like nothing more than a trick of tired eyes, a darker patch in the darkness. But as the truck moved forward, the shape remained. Someone was standing on the side of the highway. His foot eased off the accelerator without him even realizing it. This was the kind of thing drivers warned each other about. It was far too late for anyone to be out here on foot, and this stretch of highway was miles from the nearest exit. As he got closer, he waited for some sign of movement, a raised arm, a wave, anything that would explain why someone was standing there. But the figure didn't move. He just stood perfectly still, facing the road. The distance closed slowly. The man's clothing began to take shape in the headlights, a dark jacket, damp from the rain, and jeans that blended into the night. His face, however, remained hidden, swallowed by shadow. The driver felt his heart begin to race. Training and experience told him not to stop. Stories he had heard over the years crept back into his mind. Warnings passed from one driver to another. Still, a small part of him wondered if this person needed help. When the truck was almost level with him, the headlights fully illuminated the man's face. The driver felt his breath catch in his throat. It was the eyes. They reflected the light in a way that felt wrong, not like an animal caught in headlights, and not like a frightened human either. They looked calm, aware, as if the man had been waiting and was completely certain of what would happen next. There was no fear in his expression, no desperation, just a quiet, unsettling certainty. His lips parted slightly, as though he were about to speak, but no sound came. The driver tapped the brakes just for a moment, and in that instant the man vanished, not stepped back, not moved away. He was simply gone. The truck screeched slightly as the brakes grabbed on the wet road. The driver's heart pounded in his chest as he leaned forward, straining to see. He checked the side mirror, then the other. The shoulder was empty. The road behind him was empty. There were no footprints, no movement, no sign that anyone had ever been there. "This isn't possible," he muttered to himself. Then he looked forward again, and fear washed over him in a cold wave. On the inside of the windshield just above the dashboard was a handprint. Long, thin streaks ran down the glass, as if someone had pressed wet fingers against it and dragged them slowly. It wasn't smeared like something from the rain. It was too clear, too deliberate. And the worst part was the angle. The mark was on the inside-facing surface, as if someone had been standing right in front of him, close enough to touch the glass. He didn't think. He reacted. The accelerator went to the floor, the engine roared, and the truck surged forward, tearing through the darkness. His eyes darted from the road to the mirrors and back again. Every shadow felt like movement. Every signpost looked like a figure standing just beyond the reach of the headlights. His mind raced with questions he didn't want answers to. If the man had disappeared, how was the handprint there? And if the handprint was real, where was the man now? The next 30 minutes felt endless. He refused to slow down. He refused to pull over. The idea of stopping on that road, of cutting the engine and sitting in silence was unbearable. He felt watched, followed by something that stayed just outside his vision. The cab, which usually felt like a second home, now felt fragile, like a thin shell separating him from whatever haunted that stretch of highway. When a rest stop sign finally appeared in the distance, relief flooded through him. But he didn't take the exit. He couldn't bring himself to stop. He kept driving, telling himself that as long as the truck was moving, nothing could reach him. Coffee, rest, sleep, none of it mattered. All that mattered was getting off that road. Dawn came slowly. The black sky softened into deep blue, then grey. As the sun began to rise, the world started to look normal again. Trees, signs, pavement, all of it familiar, ordinary. Part of him hoped that daylight would erase the memory of what had happened, that he would convince himself it was exhaustion or stress playing tricks on his mind. But when he finally pulled over hours later and stepped out of the cab, he walked straight to the front of the truck. He leaned in close to the windshield, his stomach tightening. The handprint was still there. Rain, wind, and hours of driving had not erased it. The marks were faint now, but unmistakable. He grabbed a rag and scrubbed the glass until the print disappeared completely, but the feeling it left behind stayed with him. A deep, lingering unease that settled into his bones. Later, when he told other drivers about the experience, most laughed it off. They said lack of sleep could make a man see anything. Some suggested it was a memory of a roadside accident, something his brain had filled in with fear, but one older driver listened quietly, his expression serious. When the story was finished, he nodded slowly and said that others had seen the man too, always at night, always standing still, never asking for help. From that day on, the driver refused to travel that highway after dark. He didn't care if it cost him time or money. Some roads, he learned, carried more than cargo, and sometimes the things you see on a lonely highway aren't meant to be understood, only remembered. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a vast, empty ocean of sand and rock illuminated only by the narrow cone of the truck's headlights. The driver had been on the road for nearly 9 hours, the kind of long, uninterrupted haul that slowly dulls your thoughts until time itself feels distorted. The night sky was clear and heavy with stars, but down on the highway, everything felt muted and lifeless. No towns, no passing cars, just asphalt, darkness, and the steady vibration of the engine beneath him. He liked driving at night. Fewer cars meant fewer problems, and the quiet helped him think, or at least it usually did. That night, however, something felt off from the beginning. His phone had lost signal hours ago, and the GPS occasionally flickered, recalculating routes that never changed. He told himself it was normal out here. Deserts swallowed signals the same way they swallowed sound. To break the silence, he reached for the radio. At first, there was nothing but static, a flat, empty hiss that filled the cab. He twisted the dial slowly, searching for anything, music, voices, even an advertisement. Every station sounded the same. Static. He frowned, but didn't think much of it. Remote areas often had poor reception. After a moment, he turned the radio off and focused on the road. That was when the radio turned itself back on. The static returned suddenly, loud enough to make him flinch. He glanced down at the dashboard, confused. His hand hadn't touched the controls. Before he could reach for the knob, the static softened, breaking into something else. A voice. "Don't stop." The words were quiet but unmistakably clear. His grip tightened on the steering wheel. "Hello?" he said aloud, feeling foolish as soon as the word left his mouth. Truckers talked to themselves all the time, but this felt different. The voice hadn't sounded like a broadcast or a dispatcher. It sounded close, intimate, as if someone were sitting in the cab with him. The radio crackled again, then went silent. His heart beat faster, but he forced himself to breathe. Random interference, he told himself. Late night, long hours. The brain fills in gaps when it's tired. Still, he didn't turn the radio off. He left it on, listening to the low hiss as the miles rolled by. Several minutes passed without anything unusual. The road remained straight and empty, the desert unmoving on either side. He began to relax, the tension slowly draining from his shoulders. That was when the voice returned. Do not stop at the next rest area. This time, his blood ran cold. The voice wasn't distorted. It didn't sound like it was coming from far away. It sounded calm, certain. And worst of all, it sounded like it knew something he didn't. He stared ahead, his eyes scanning the darkness beyond the headlights. "Who is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Static answered him. A green highway sign appeared in the distance, glowing faintly as the truck approached. Rest area, 2 miles. His stomach tightened. He hadn't mentioned the rest area out loud. He hadn't even been thinking about it consciously, though part of him had been counting the miles until he could pull over and rest his eyes. "Why?" he asked the empty cab. "What's at the rest area?" The radio crackled softly, as if responding to his question. For a moment he thought the voice might return, explain itself. But it didn't. The static faded, and the radio went dead again. He passed the sign in silence, his thoughts racing. Every instinct told him to ignore what had happened, to pull over when he needed rest like he always did. But another instinct, deeper and harder to explain, urged him to keep driving. The desert felt suddenly hostile, as though it were listening, waiting to see what choice he would make. The rest area came into view a few minutes later. A small cluster of lights sat just off the highway, flickering weakly against the vast darkness. It looked deserted. No parked cars, no visible movement, just a lonely place carved out of nothingness. His foot hovered over the brake. He was exhausted, his eyes burned. The idea of stopping, stretching his legs, grabbing a coffee from the vending machine, it was tempting, painfully tempting, but as the exit ramp drew closer, the words echoed in his mind. "Don at stop." He stayed on the highway. As soon as he passed the exit, the radio came alive again. "That was close," the voice said. His chest tightened, breath catching painfully in his throat. He swerved slightly before correcting the wheel. "That's not funny," he said sharply, though fear crept into every syllable. "Who are you?" There was a pause, long enough that he wondered if he'd imagined the voice again. Then it spoke, someone who listened once. A chill ran through him. Listen to what? To the warning. The radio crackled, and for a brief moment, another sound bled through the static. A faint, distant screaming. It was so quiet he almost missed it, but once he heard it, he couldn't unhear it. The sound vanished as quickly as it appeared, replaced once more by silence. He stared at the radio, his reflection faintly visible in the dark screen. "What happens at that rest area?" he asked. The voice didn't answer. The rest of the drive felt unreal. He watched the mirrors obsessively, half expecting to see headlights that weren't there, or figures standing just beyond the beam of his taillights. The radio remained silent, no matter how much he adjusted the dial. When dawn finally began to lighten the sky, he pulled into a busy truck stop miles away from the desert stretch and shut off the engine. Only then did his hands begin to shake. Inside the diner, surrounded by other drivers and the clatter of dishes, the experience felt distant, like a dream fading in daylight. He ordered coffee and tried to laugh it off. Still, when he overheard 2 drivers talking about road closures, his ears perked up. "Rest area shut down," one of them said. "Cops everywhere last night." The other shook his head. "Yeah. Heard a driver went missing, rig still there, engine cold." The first driver lowered his voice. "That's the 3rd one this year, isn't it?" The coffee cup slipped slightly in his hand. He didn't join their conversation. He didn't need to. He already knew which rest area they were talking about. Later that day, curiosity got the better of him. While waiting for his next dispatch, he searched online. News articles confirmed it. A trucker had stopped at the desert rest area late at night and vanished without a trace. No signs of struggle, no witnesses, just an empty truck and unanswered questions. That night, as he lay in the sleeper cab, unable to sleep, the radio clicked on softly. He froze. The static was gentle this time, almost comforting. "You did the right thing," the voice said. He swallowed hard. "Why me?" There was a pause. "Because you were listening." The radio shut off. He never heard the voice again after that night, but he didn't forget it. He avoided that stretch of highway whenever possible and never stopped at. Isolated rest areas after dark. Some warnings, he learned, don't come from signs or maps. They come from voices you can't explain, voices that know the road far better than you ever will. The cold woke him before the sound did. Even inside the sleeper cab, wrapped in a thick blanket with the engine idling softly, the chill crept in like something alive. It wasn't the normal cold of night air seeping through metal and glass. This felt heavier, sharper, as if the darkness itself carried a temperature. He shifted in his bunk and opened his eyes, staring at the ceiling of the cab, trying to remember where he was, an abandoned truck stop. The decision to stop there had been made out of exhaustion, not logic. The last active rest area had been full, every spot taken by rigs parked close together, engines humming in uneven rhythm. He had driven another 30 miles before his eyelids grew too heavy to fight. When the faded sign appeared, its letters barely visible, the lights long dead, he told himself he would just stop for a couple of hours, just enough to close his eyes. The lot had been empty when he pulled in. No trucks, no cars, not even the distant glow of a building light. Just cracked pavement, weeds growing through old oil stains, and one lone light pole near the entrance flickering weakly as if struggling to stay alive. He remembered hesitating before cutting the engine, the silence pressing in so quickly it felt unnatural. But exhaustion won. It always did. Now, lying awake in the sleeper, he wished it hadn't. A soft sound reached him through the walls of the cab, a dull, hollow noise, almost rhythmic. At first his tired mind tried to explain it away, the wind maybe, or the metal cooling. He held his breath and listened. Knock. His eyes snapped open fully. The sound came again, clearer this time, slow, deliberate, as if someone were tapping on metal with their knuckles. Knock, knock. His heart began to pound. No one should have been there. He was certain the lot had been empty. He pushed himself up on one elbow, listening hard. The knock came from the driver's side door. "Hello?" he called, his voice rough with sleep. No answer. Silence returned, thick and suffocating. He waited, counting his breaths, telling himself he was overreacting. Truck stops attracted people sometimes, drifters, travelers looking for help. Maybe someone had walked in from the road. Maybe they just wanted to ask for directions. Still, he didn't move. After nearly a minute passed, he began to relax. His body slowly sank back toward the mattress. Then the knock came again, louder this time, sharper. Not impatient, but insistent. He sat up fully now, his pulse racing. "Who's there?" he asked. Nothing. The silence that followed felt intentional, like a response in itself. He reached forward and gently pulled the sleeper curtain aside, just enough to peer into the cab without fully exposing himself. The windshield showed nothing but darkness beyond the reach of the moonlight. He leaned closer to the side window, heart hammering in his ears. The lot was empty. No footsteps, no shadows, no movement near the door. A wave of relief washed over him, quickly followed by confusion. He let out a shaky breath and started to pull the curtain closed. That was when the knock came from behind him, not the door, the sleeper door. The small, reinforced panel at the back of the cab that separated the sleeping area from the outside. The sound was sudden and violent. Bang! He froze, every muscle locked in place. His breath caught painfully in his chest as another bang followed, harder than before. The metal shuddered with the impact. "Open up," a voice said. It was low and strained, like someone speaking through clenched teeth, not shouting, not pleading, just commanding. His mind screamed at him to move, but his body refused. The sleeper door was never used. Most drivers forgot it even existed. There was no reason for anyone to be back there. No reason at all. The handle on the door rattled. "Open the door," the voice said again, closer now. Too close. He lunged forward, scrambling into the driver's seat. His hand shook so badly it took him 2 tries to get the key into the ignition. The knocking intensified, fists slamming against the back of the cab with growing urgency. Bang, bang, bang! The engine roared to life. As soon as it did, the knocking stopped. The sudden silence was almost worse than the noise. He slammed the truck into gear and hit the accelerator, tires squealing as the rig lurched forward. He didn't look in the mirrors. He didn't want to see anything standing there watching him leave. He didn't slow down until the abandoned truck stop was miles behind him, swallowed by darkness once more. When dawn finally came, he pulled into a busy, well-lit fuel station. Other trucks were already parked there, Drivers moving about with coffee cups in their hands, engines rumbling. The normalcy of it all made the night feel unreal, like a nightmare that faded with daylight. But the fear returned the moment he stepped out of the cab. At the back of the truck, just beneath the sleeper door handle, deep scratch marks gouged the metal. Long, uneven lines, as if something sharp had been dragged repeatedly across the surface. They weren't old. The bare metal beneath gleamed faintly in the morning light. A nearby driver noticed him staring and walked over. "Everything okay, man?" he asked. He hesitated and nodded. "Yeah, just rough night." The other driver followed his gaze to the scratches. His expression changed. The casual friendliness drained from his face. "You didn't stop at the old truck stop off Route 17, did you?" he asked quietly. The question sent a chill through him. "How do you know about that place?" The man exhaled slowly. "Because every few years someone does, and every few years someone doesn't leave." "What happens there?" he asked. The driver shook his head. "Nobody knows for sure, but folks say if you hear knocking back there, you're already being tested." "Tested for what?" "For whether you're willing to open the door." He never returned to that route. He never slept at abandoned stops again, no matter how tired he was. And sometimes, on cold nights when the engine noise fades just enough, he swears he can still hear it. A slow, patient knock, waiting for him to make the wrong choice.